Perfect. Thank you so much, Linnea. So I'd like to thank Linnea and the CTO team for inviting me to present at the inaugural Research Ready Mentor Spotlight series. Today we're going to be talking about REDCap, which is an acronym for Research Electronic Data Capture. The title of today's talk is Capturing and Reporting Data Effectively Using REDCap's Full Potential. Okay, and I have no financial disclosures. Objectives. So today we're going to be looking at some introduction to electronic data captures, the GCP principles that are associated with data, and REDCap itself. We're going to build a sample CRF using some of the most common data fields that most of the researchers in the audience may be familiar with. And based off of some data that I've pre-filled in REDCap, we're going to build some dynamic reports. But before I get started on the rest of the webinar, if Linnea could just pull up a poll asking the audience members what type of REDCap history, or what kind of history they have with REDCap. So I'll give it a few more seconds. It looks like about 2/3 of you have some sort of REDCap experience, and about 1/3 of you have not yet used the program. So that's great. Thank you so much. And so a background on the use of EDCs, or the electronic data captures that are out there. Electronic data capture has been around for over 3 decades. It started out as a sponsor-funded study component, mainly for its ease and accuracy. Currently, investigator-initiated studies use EDCs as well. But smaller, unfunded studies may still lack an EDC option, and this is where REDCap may be an option. So all of data has a GCP principle that's attached to it. In this case, the acronym is ALCOAC, where A stands for attributable. Is it obvious who recorded this piece of data? Legible, can it be read on the source documentation? Contemporaneous, collected at the correct time and documented at the correct time that it was collected. Original, is it a copy? Has it been altered in any way? Can you go back to its source document? And accurate, are conflicting data recorded elsewhere in an EMR or in another piece of information that's available for that subject? And the last C stands for complete. Is all the documentation available, that there is a process for monitoring and auditing that chart? Well, what is REDCap? REDCap is a secure web application for building and managing online surveys and databases. It was built by the Vanderbilt University in 2004. 132 countries, over 1 million users, and several languages are available. Regulatory compliance of HIPAA, FISMA 21 CFR Part 11, and is also compliant with Canadian legislation such as HIA, FOIP, and TCPS2. This is all environment dependent. So it's really important to talk to your IT department and understand where most of your web-based database sits. It is considered an open architecture and not open source. And the difference between that is open source is where you're able to manipulate the mainframe programming. Open architecture means that you can use the program to customize it towards a challenge or a problem that you're working on. Licenses are available to nonprofits, institutions, and last I heard, there is a for-profit license that's available as well. Well, how does REDCap manage data? This diagram illustrates the layers of what a common EDC might have. It's kind of like an onion. So the core functionality of all EDCs is to collect and store data. Excuse me. The next layer would be the quality and standardization of that data. Also, to make sure that all that data is kept in privacy, confidentiality, and it's secure. If you have a very robust EDC, you might be able to analyze some of that data and also export it to other statistical software that's available. But what's unique about REDCap is the ability to be able to transfer, share, and collaborate within the same web application. How does REDCap benefit me? It is an autonomous web application, so means that there's the freedom to act independently without any sort of REDCap overture. This means that none of the data is actually viewable by anyone except for a user that you have given privilege to. It's easy to learn and use, has higher data quality and control because you as a user are able to validate each piece of data with any sort of quality measure attached to it. It replaces Excel, Access, and SurveyMonkey and any paper CRFs that are currently being used. It means that you can centralize the data. And this is a huge bonus that REDCap offers us is the ability to actually scan in any sort of sort documentation into REDCap itself, making pretty much everything electronic. REBs readily understand what REDCap is because they're involved in the conversations between the licensing agreements. When the licensing agreements are happening, REBs and ethics boards understand what REDCap is and how it benefits the researcher and the investigator. Has low maintenance, which means that all of the REDCap updates are done usually on the REDCap side or the REDCap administrator and not really the user themselves. There is no cost to the user or the organization. All it is an agreement, the licensing agreement that they sign. REDCap updates regularly on their side. A REDCap community of experts is also available through their website. And because it's an online platform, it's accessible at any time, anywhere, on any sort of web browser that's available, such as Chrome, Safari, Firefox, etc. Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's say I had a project called Sample Project in this case. This instrument was being built from scratch, incorporating some common data fields that we are familiar with as researchers. This project is actually based off of a case report form that was built for an HIV hepatitis C screening program that Linnea just talked about, which was my last place of employment. This is for demonstration purposes only. So when you first receive your username and your password, this is the homepage that you will enter. As you can see, the top headline or the taskbar includes common tools that are important to any user. Once you've started a new project, it will be listed here under My Projects. In this case, I only have one project and it's called the Sample Project. Once I've hit the sample project, I enter into my workspace. On my left-hand side is my taskbar. It includes shortcuts to all my frequently or readily available tools. And on my right-hand side is the workspace that I actually do my CRF designing, my entering of data, all of that is right here. That's my first tab called Project Home. And Project Home is just basically the home page. You can look at all the current users that have the different privileges, what kind of any sort of simple project statistics that are available, any upcoming calendar events that might be important. So that's also a unique feature of REDCap is that you can attach calendar events, which means that there's an ease to collect that subject's information. Let's go on to the next tab, which is called Project Setup. So what's great about REDCap is the programmers have really thought about the methodical way of designing a data collection instrument. In this case, you start at the top, and because they're not labeled, it's not necessary to start there, and it's not required, but it's always a great thing to start at the top and fill in the main project settings, what the project title is, what's the purpose. Also, here you have the ability to pick if you're going to be using surveys in the project or any longitudinal data collection defined events. And the second step here is actually designing the data collection instrument yourself. Here, under Online Designer, is where you would actually get the CRF going. It can be found in this part of the page as well as on the taskbar. And that's a shortcut for you right here, a designer. Let's say you're one institute amongst a multi-site clinical trial, and another site has already started using REDCap to collect its data. And if they've already, gotten a CRF together and they've been actively collecting data, it might be a great idea to reach out to them, ask them if they would be willing to start share that CRF with you. And this is where I mean by collaboration and that ability to be able to share and transfer information. If you're able to receive their data dictionary, you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel at all. You wouldn't have to design a CRF from scratch. Actually, you would just upload it and then you can start collecting your data. This helps with consistently collecting the same piece of data that's out there. And that's a unique feature of REDCap. But let's say, its data dictionary is also under taskbar. But let's say I had to just start from scratch and I'm going to use Online Designer. I'm going to hit Online Designer, and that's going to take me to this tab. This is where I'm able to create my data collection instruments. And what's wonderful about REDCap is you can create multiple different data collection instruments. In this case, I only have one data collection instrument, but let's say if you were part of a study that required um, more than one instrument. For example, you want to base each data collection instrument off of different visits. So visit one would have the height, the weight, the medical history of the patient. But then in visit two, you would look at something more specific to that visit. For example, the type of adverse events that they've experienced. And this helps you break down the data collection instrument and not have to crowd it into one data collection instrument. You can actually break it down based off of different either events or different types of audience members. So you could do something like, this is a cognitive survey that I need to send out to these people, or you could do it based off of different departments, such as this is laboratory information that I need to collect versus this is a chart review. So it really does give you a lot of flexibility right there. Let's say I go into my project or my data collection instrument, and then I'm able to design the CRF right here. What I do is I add a field. A field is what is called, what in the data collection instrument would be like a question in a CRF. So let's say I hit that button, and that will bring me up a pop-up. And the pop-up has a field type. The field type is the type of question I want to ask or answer if I'm the data entry personnel also creating my CRF. So this is where there's a lot of, there's the need for planning and having some foresight into how this case report form or this data collection tool can work best for you when you're exporting that data. So you really do need to think about how you're going to ask this question in order to receive the type of data that will be useful for you later on. And field type allows you to have different types of options available. So let's look at the drop-down menu for that. So you can ask a question as a short text box. You can look at a multiple choice with a drop-down list, asking for a single answer, or you can do check boxes for multiple answers. Let's say I just use it for a short text box. And, and I just want to do a very simple client ID. Here, as you notice, I've alphabetically numbered it or alphabetized it. And this is not a requirement for REDCap. You can simply just put in client ID, and that would be fine. There isn't a need to number anything. That isn't going to be a requirement later on, but here I've numbered it. What's important in REDCap is to make sure that you do get the variable name correct. And what I mean by that is it's a name that is understood by yourself, what it means, the definition of it, and understood by other people in your team. So something short, because this is the title of the column when you are exporting the data into another robust statistical software, or even if you're exporting it to Excel, this is the column name that you will get. Okay. All the fields have the option to be required. If it's required, that means that REDCap will not allow you to go further in your CRF until you've answered or responded to that question. You can also tag different pieces of information with an identifier tag. And this means that the common identifiers, about 17 of them out there are things like name, social security number, or social insurance number, address, things like of that nature. And let's say if you tag it as an identifier later on as a user, only those with high enough privileges are able to export that identifier type of data out of REDCap. This is just a security functionality that REDCap allows you to have. And I'll show you how that can work in the reports section. So let's say I'm satisfied with my field. I hit save. And this will be my end product. And what you'll notice is it comes up as a simple text box right here. As a data entry personnel, I'll be able to write in my MRN or my client ID right in here. But that's a very simple field type to use. Let's try something a little bit more challenging. What if I had to do a multiple choice one with the ability to only check mark one choice? So here my question is overall status, the linkage coordinator assigned to this patient. I have various choices available to me. And let's say I was going to put this in as a field type. So the field type I would choose is multiple choice radio button single answer. And I would call it exactly what I want to be on the final product. So here I have alphabetized or labeled it, but that isn't a requirement of REDCap. You could just write in overall status, linkage coordinator assigned to patient. But what is important is the choices that I put in. Remember, these are really important in the sense that you do want to label them. You want to numerically label them. And then you want to add what it is that you want to show up on the final product. And remember that later on, you won't be able to delete one and put another one in its place. This is pretty much the set number of choices. There isn't a way for REDCap to go back in and try and manipulate that data. It is pretty much set once you've entered your choices here. The variable name, I've chosen something that is consistent with that question and also very understandable to myself and to my team members when I export this data. And the final product will look like this. It will have the question on the left-hand side with the choices available on my right-hand side, making for a very easy understanding of what that question's asking and the ability to be able to respond to that correctly. Okay, so I mean, you could probably be thinking to yourself, that's pretty easy, Geetha. What else can REDCap do that could really make my career a little bit easier, can make my CRF a little bit better than anyone else's? Well, What REDCap can do is something called branching logic, and branching logic is a game changer. For instance, it can be used to hide fields related to pregnancy if the subject in the database is male. And this could be really important to someone, for example, who has a very unwieldy CRF, where, once a question is answered as no, then you have to skip a bunch of other questions to get to the question that now relates back to that patient. This could be an important functionality, for example, if you're building a screening tool, like, for example, an exclusionary screening tool to see if a patient actually meets the criteria to enter into your investigation. In this case, I'm going to show a really easy, simple example of this. So I'm going to use gender and pregnancy questions. So here, REDCap has given us a little green arrow that we press, and that's called the branching logic icon. That gives me a pop-up, and it gives me two different options to be able to hide the questions that are related to pregnancy when the choice is not female or transgender. So the first available choice is the advanced branching logic syntax. This uses and/or functionality or logic language to be able to pull up the other questions. So if the gender is O2 female or gender is O3 transgender, I do want the other questions to come up. What's great about this type of option is that you can test the logic with a record. So you have to have the foresight to know what the gender of that record is in order for the question to come up or not. So I've chosen record 1, which I know is a male, so it would be false. It would hide the rest of the pregnancy questions for me. And let's say I tested on record 2, which is a female, it would not hide the questions for me, making the rest of the questions available. And that's what that shows right there. Let's say you're not very familiar with logic language and you'd like a little bit more of a simpler way to add branching logic to your CRF. You could use a drag and drop logic builder. Here, you use the field choices that are available to you in the data collection instrument. Make sure you correctly choose the data collection instrument that you want this branching logic to show up on. Here, it will default to the only one that I have available, so which is the TGH Focus Project data collection instrument. Then you would go through the different fields and you would choose the two that you want to show. So here it's show the field only if any of the below are true, when the gender O2 female or when gender is transgender O3. And I hit the save button. And this will be my final product where gender shows up, but none of the questions related to pregnancy will show up unless I hit the response of female or transgender. So that is how the CRF can be built using REDCap. Okay, the next topic I really want to speak about is report building. So what is great about REDCap reports are that they are dynamic and easy to build. And when I say dynamic, it means that they're fully customizable in real time, which means less time creating the report and more time actually using the data to make decisions based off of it. The reports incorporate logic so that the only specific information appears on the report, which means the piece of the pie based on the population of data that you have just acquired will come up on that report. Simple statistics and charts can also be displayed, and an export tool is available to allow you to export the data to Excel, SAS, SPSS data, and R for more robust analysis. Awesome. So this will be what that page looks like. It is found on the top tab as well as readily available on your taskbar on your left-hand side. You have the ability to view all your data all at once, but in my experience, we also want to be able to look at subset populations and look at trends that are happening so we can make some informed decisions based off of that. For that, you would hit the Create New Report button. It's also available on the top as a tab, and that will bring up this page. I have just blown up the workspace for you so you don't see the taskbar. And let's say I wanted a report called HIV contact list. And this list would give me all the patients that were screened positive in December and need to be contacted in January. So I've sort of written a short description of what this report is so that everyone in the team understands what that is. And what's great in REDCap is that because it's so methodological, um, there are steps involved in creating the report. So step one is you look at the user. Who are the users that you want looking at this report? So you have the ability to set these as narrow or as wide as you want. So do you want all users looking at it, or do you want to customize it based off of some privileges that they have? And you also have the ability to do this for edit function as well. The next step is choosing all the column titles that you want on this report. So in this case, I need the client ID, what disease they have, their last name so I can address them correctly. I would like their date of birth so I can identify them appropriately, the phone numbers that I'd like to call them at, and then also what was the date that they tested positive. And then for step three, and this is arguably the most important step because now you've filtered the report, but now these are the real filters that will actually filter to the subset of population that you can make decisions based off of or have a contact list in this case. So I only want HIV or dually infected patients, so HIV and hepatitis C. So I've put in my two diseases, and what's important is that I've used a functionality, a logic language, or if I had put in and, I would have no patients come up on my report because there isn't an ability to choose both of these diseases. Only one of those choices are available to me. And then in the filter 3, which is under the and, you would put in this field would have patients screened in December for the January list. And what I mean by that is if they had a screening test that was positive in December, then I would want them to be on this January list. And then for step 4, I would like them to be ordered by the client ID in ascending order. And then I would hit the Save Report. This would bring up a pop-up allowing me to view the report, return to my reports and exports, or continue editing the report itself. But I'm going to actually view the report. This will be my report itself. It has functional data for data demonstration purposes, and it has all of the HIV and hepatitis C dually infected patients, and also their names, their date of birth, and their contact information. But let's say that you just don't want to look at patients in January. You want to look at patients in February. And I would go back into the same report and update filter 3 to January so that I have it available for my February list. So that is how REDCap is able to provide a dynamic tool. That's how they are dynamic, by being able to filter for the type of patients, a subset of population that you're interested in. In this case, the patients that I would be calling in February. I would hit Save Report, and then we would see a list, very similar to the prior one. Okay. And based off of that subset population, also have the ability to go and look at some statistics and charts. Of course, this is descriptive statistics, so very simple statistics that are available to you. So the mean, median, and the mode of the data that's already in there. I have client ID available for me. So if there's any missing information, that would be displayed there. Here I have the disease and the population and their sort of distribution of what type of diseases that they have. And if I'm actually satisfied with this diagram, I have the ability to download this image. This means that I could put it into a presentation or a report. It's a very good or a very easy way to not have to go into Excel and try and manipulate something to get a bar graph. But let's say I really want to do some further analysis, some really robust analysis. Then I would be able to export the data. That would bring up this pop-up window right here. And I have the ability to choose an export format. So in this case, I could do Excel with the raw data or with labels. So raw data meaning all of the data, including the choices, or the labels, which means just the coding that you've given it. And I can also do other type of statistical software such as SPSS, SAS, R, and Stata. And I'm sure you remember a couple of slides prior, I had spoken about identifier tags. So for de-identification purposes, you have the ability to remove all tagged identifier fields. So that is something that is unique to REDCap. Let's say if you are, sharing this data with a colleague or you're using it for some other purposes, then you have the ability to remove any sort of identifier fields and you're able to share some of that data with them. Okay, so that brings me actually to the end of my presentation. And I just wanted to let you know that we are doing an interactive Q&A on the Research Ready Community Hub itself. I'm also available right now for any questions. I'll take some real time. There are demo videos that are available on projectredcap.org. You can also speak to your IT department if you already have REDCap in the works. Again, my name is Geetha Sanmugalingham. I'm an independent consultant. This is my email address, and I invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And as a last thought, as a take-home message, a mentor a few years earlier had told me that research changes culture. And I really believe accurate and quality data is research. So let's keep that in mind as we investigate and do all kinds of wonderful things to make our world a better place. So thank you again to Linnea, the CTO team, and Research Ready as well.
Thank you, Geetha.